Thank you for bearing with us these minutes. I'm very happy to have, all of you were in here, so I don't really have to make big introductions, but nevertheless I'd say how honored and grateful I am to have you two here. Schory and Maoz, the director of Foxtrot, and Katriel Schory, director of the Israel Film Festival. With Foxtrot, it's like that. Even before you have seen the film, you will have already heard about it and about the scandal it caused. And I promise we're going to get to this topic, but a little later. Foxtrot won 8 awards at the Israeli Academy Awards. It won the Grand Jury Prize in Venice, and Samuel dedicated the Silver Lion to Katriel Schory, because he said Katriel stands like this lion and protects the freedom of speech and the purity of art. So this is where we are heading today. I would like to start with the origin of Foxtrot. Samuel, how did you get to this idea?
I can talk about 2 factors that motivated me to create Foxtrot. The first is a personal story that happened to me a long time ago. When my eldest daughter went to school, she never woke up on time, and in order not to be late, she asked me to call for a taxi. This habit started to cost us quite a bit of money, and it seemed to me like a bad education. So one morning I got mad and told her to take the bus like everyone else do. And if that's why she'll be late, she'll be late. Maybe she needs to learn the hard way to wake up on time. Her bus was line 5, a quite famous line in Tel Aviv. About 20 minutes after she left, I hear in the radio that a terrorist blew himself up in line 5 and that dozens of people were killed. I tried to call her, of course, but the cellular operator collapsed because of the unexpected load, I guess. And after 1 hour, she returned home. She was late for the bus that exploded, but in a few seconds. She saw the bus in the station, she started to run, waved her arms, but the bus left the station and she took the next bus. And I thought to myself, what can I learn from this experience? Because after all, it seemed to me that I did something right and logical to do. And I realized that I can't learn anything, but I wanted to investigate, to explore, to deal with the gap between the things we control and those that beyond our control. And this story was my first stimulation. It was the core of the film, and is also related to the philosophical motif in the film, to questions like. Is life a result of a meaningless, chaotic chance, or is chance itself a sophisticated, well-arranged plan? Can we direct our fate, and if so, at what price? Albert Einstein said that coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. This is perhaps the most elegant sentence I want to say about Foxtrot, but I can't because there is another factor, another layer. The first film that I made was Lebanon. Lebanon was my first, my true personal story, describing my war experience from my visual point of view as a gunner in a tank, and from my emotional point of view as a 20-year-old child who never was involved in any act of violence, and one morning found himself killing people. So I had guilt feelings, and I can say that I suffered from a small silent post-trauma. It's nothing clinic, it's nothing like the cliché of the post-traumatic man. I function, I work, I create, I'm sociable, have family, I'm not depressed, the opposite, I'm optimistic, and I don't have nightmares. But this quiet, tricky post-trauma knocked me out of my life for many years. And I can say that I guess that this is the main reason why I made my first feature film at the age of 48 instead of 30-something. So in Lebanon, I talked about myself. But after the film came out, I realized that I'm not alone, as I thought, and that the Israeli society produces many versions like me, too many. And suddenly I understood why we, the Israeli society, why we behave as we do. And my simple and complex answer was that we are a traumatic society. Our emotional memory from our past traumas, the peak of it was the Holocaust, followed by our survival wars. This emotional memory is stronger than any current reality or logic. And don't get me wrong, I'm not justify or not justify our behavior. I'm trying to diagnose it. As I'm not judge my characters, I try to understand them. So in Lebanon, I talked about the trauma. Foxtrot deals with the post-trauma. In Foxtrot, I added an additional layer. I wanted to tell a personal story that reflects the collective. So from a wider perspective, I can say that Foxtrot deals with the bleeding wound or bleeding soul of the Israeli society, with the traumatic circle we are trapped in. We dance the Foxtrot. Each generation tries to dance it differently. But like the Foxtrot steps, we always end at the same starting point.
As far as I know, you, after Lebanon, you thought about writing a comedy, but then you wrote Foxtrot, and I would like to know, Katriel, what made you believe in the script and come on board?
Okay, so in Lebanon we had a very close relationship. Lebanon, the production of Lebanon was a real roller coaster with ups and downs and with terrible situations like the death of the producer and so on and so on. But I thought and I knew that Shmulik, I call him Shmulik, okay? That Shmulik is a is a creative artist and a filmmaker with a real integrity, who is completely truthful to himself and to his art. And I went with him all the way in Lebanon, which was not easy because many of the people around us, I would say mildly, did not believe in the film. I'm not sure they believed in Shmulik, but I thought that it's a film that has to be made, and it was made brilliantly, and you know, all the rest is history. And then Shmulik, after Lebanon, came to me and says, I feel like writing a comedy. I said, okay, Shmulik, go and write a comedy. And I will help you out. And then Shmulik disappeared, and it took him about a year, I think, or even more than a year. And he came back to me and said, I cannot write a comedy. It doesn't really work for me. I said, okay, do you have another story? He said, yes, I have another story. And he gave me like, I think, 4 or 5 pages of Foxtrot. And I said, okay, this is more along your line. Go and write. And then he went and he wrote the script, and he came back to us. And we read the script, and I read the script, and I thought that this story is an extremely powerful story, but it's a really universal story, because I believe that any of us who has a family or loved ones, when you see 2 or 3 people coming to your door, whether they are policemen or military or whatever, and knocking, or the people of first aid knocking on your door, you know that they come to announce and tell you about a terrible, dreadful thing which happened, and the sky at that moment collapses on you. And this is a situation that all of us who have kids or family, it's this never going away of this kind of nightmare that we sometimes feel. And I thought that this applies to everybody, to parents of American soldiers in Afghanistan, etc. And I thought that this is also a story about loss, about grief, about coping with it, and about guilt, and about how you live with your guilt and what it means for you throughout your life. And I knew that Shmulik will deliver a film, because I knew that he has this very strong professional integrity and that he will deliver a film. I didn't know what he will deliver. I could not envisage the complete cinematic vision, even though I knew that next to the film, next to the script, there is a very strong, powerful, and a very distinctive cinematic vision. But I knew that deep down there is a strong backbone of a creative person, and this is why we decided to go with it.
I would like to talk about the cinematic vision, because it is, even as you said, it is like the most horrible story ever of parents losing a child, but you managed to make such an outstanding piece of art of it and combine so many different visual elements and cinematic elements into it. And I would like to start with asking why the three-part structure?
Three reasons. Main reasons. I decided to structure my story as a Greek tragedy in 3 acts, in which the hero creates his own punishment and fights against anyone who tries to save him. He is obviously unaware of the outcome that his action will bring about. And this is, I think, the opposite is doing something that seemed like right and logical to do. And this is, I think, the difference between a casual coincidence to a coincidence that looks like a plan of fate. I mean, chaos is settled, the punishment corresponds with the scene in its exact form. I felt that a structure of a Greek tragedy in 3 acts is the best platform to deliver my story. Now, each sequence reflects, with all its cinematic tools, reflects the character who leads the sequence. So the first sequence reflects the character of Michael. This is a sharp sequence, cold, very graphic, symmetrical, made of detached composition and long and accurate shots. The third sequence, Daphna's sequence, is more simple and loose, soft and warm. The mid sequence, Jonathan's sequence, floats a few inches above the ground like an inner world of a dreamy artist. And then there is another reason. I built an emotional journey that I want the audience to experience during the film. So I told myself that the first sequence should shock and shake, the second should hypnotize, and the third should be moving. And the division into 3 sequences helped me to control this process.
Should we show one of the clips that we have?
Not yet.
Not yet? Do you want to start with the images?
No, because let's maybe speak about the visual aspect first.
Okay, right. So I'm going to try to steer him that way, talk about the visual aspect, and then he will
Yes, because I want
share
to talk.
some
I want
visuals
to
with us.
talk about the clip
Please.
immediately after we'll screen it. The visual aspect. I can say that a spark of an idea created in my mind is almost always visual. At the end of the process, the visual dimension serves the idea, but but the idea was born because of this visual stimulation. Let's see maybe the first. Can I
images?
click it?
The first of the images, yeah. Here we go.
It's here, okay. This image, this was the first image that lit my imagination was the picture hanging behind Daphna as she opened the front door. I remember that I looked at this picture and I felt like I was seeing an X-ray of Michael's soul. And there is also an organized chaos in the picture, conversion into a black hole, into a secret. So I can say that this picture defined for me the mental state of Michael and also the philosophical theme of the film. Because I don't make a naturalistic cinema. My cinema is more, I can say, experiential and tries to penetrate or reflect the souls of my characters. This is a kind of cinema that the visual aspect is an integral part of the story, and I can give a few examples. I choose this particular floor because when the camera starts spinning, it creates a real physical dizziness. In this picture, Michael enters the toilet to escape from the horrible reality that hunting him, suffocates him. He feels like walls of reality are closing in on him. One wide look at Michael's apartment should give us a lot of information about him. Michael's position should tell us a lot about him as well. He says his first sentence when he is far away from us, with his back to the camera. And what is the sentence? I don't want people around me right now. So we have a combination between position, short sentence, and space, very graphic, cold, symmetrical, and creates a certain sense of discomfort from the pedantic care. And all these three elements, position, short sentence, and space, can save us many pages of dialogue. Now we can see the clip. Thank you. This scene that opened the second sequence explain us without saying a word what's going on in this roadblock. Which world we entered. We still don't suspect that the camel is Chekhov's gun yet, but I mean, for now, his job is to describe the effectiveness of this military post, an army checkpoint where camel crosses and soldier dance. But this scene has another job I want to talk about. I believe there is an unwritten agreement between the creator and the audience. The audience starting point is that they want to enjoy the film they are about to see. So the audience will go with the creator in any way the creator chooses to lead them. There is only one condition. You need to keep them on your track. And I broke this agreement. And after 35 minutes, I did a brutal cut to another plot, another story, with a different cast, in a different location, and with a different cinematic style. So I took the audience out of one story just as the story had a surprising dramatic change, and moved on to another world. From this moment, I have a minute, maybe two, to to recapture the audience. Otherwise, I will lose them. And this scene does that job, does that trick. And the trick is very basic and simple. I mean, the audience was under heavy pressure for 35 minutes, under a stress. So it's quite easy to make them laugh because they want to feel relief. Give them a camel, give them an absurd humor and a crazy dance, and they are yours again. So I can certainly say that I also work from my head, but you know, there is another level. I think that the heart of the film is an intuitive translation of my inner world, I think, and I can't say much about that.
I think that the second part, which is what we call the military part, it's really a complete and a total metaphor. There are no checkpoints like this. These rifles that they use are very old ones, definitely not in use. The whole checkpoint, the whole place where the soldiers are and so on, it's a metaphor. It's the imagination of Shmulik. There are some elements which are also part of our life in a way, but it's a metaphor, and this is how it should be seen. And there are quite a lot of symbols which I guess Shmulik wanted to convey, the sliding of this container and where they live, which is sinking in the mud, and some other elements, but he can talk about it more. And what I've learned throughout the years, and also in this film, that some people don't understand or don't want to understand and see that this is actually a metaphor, and this is not a piece of news which was last night on the CNN. And there is a kind of a confusion there. But we have to understand, it's a movie. And he created a whole universe with this movie. And this is what we should really see when we watch this film.
I remember when Samuel came with a project to the Berlinale residency in 2012, and you already had the story, but there wasn't the structure and all those. I think just a fantastic idea to use all the humor you put in there and the different genres. What made you put animation in there also, like the comic strips? When did that come? Like was that a conscious decision to say, okay, here's my dramatic story, but I want, as you just described, I want the audience to be ripped out of it at one point and get them in a different way? Or was that a picture you had in your head one day?
I thought that the father will understand that his boy, in a way, knew his secret or knew that he's hiding something. In the beginning of the third sequence, when everything starts to open. And this is also a kind of trick, because during this scene you have an introduction to Michael and Daphna. You know how they met, what happened till then in some short. And it's not animation, by the way.
Yes.
It's sketches, but any sketch has two key points. Mm-hmm. So we have the illusion of very rough and primitive movement, but it was important to me to leave it as an illustration, and not.
Right.
And it also says something about Jonathan himself, about the boy.
Mm-hmm. How did you find your cast, and how did you work with them?
Okay, so let's screen another clip.
The second clip of Michael.
This scene I choose to show to screen it because this scene was the most difficult scene for Leo, my actor. Basically, all the part was very difficult because usually an actor, has one scene like that or one shooting day. imagine yourself 10 shooting days, from 7 in the morning till 7 in the evening. Good morning, Leo, your son has died 1, 2, or 3 hours ago. And I must believe him because the audience, they are very sensitive when you deal with such an extreme emotional state. But this scene was the most difficult scene for him. 2.5 minutes of close-up, no partner, no text, not much action, and we need to see and feel how the awareness of the horrible news floods him. We need to see his bleeding soul. So I have my way of working in my actors, mainly in situations like this. I basically don't turn off the camera between the takes. I just say first position, sometimes make a brief comment and do another take. But I'm talking during the shot. I stress the actor. I tell him what he's going through and what he feels, and I push him very, very extremely. But in the character context, of course. So I can say that I turn the shot into a session. The actor does not know when the cut will release him until he does not care anymore. I believe that when you go through a difficulty, mental or physical, like, for example, the woman that stands in the rain in the desert for almost 10 minutes. She did it in the frozen cold of the desert. I believe that when you deal with such difficulties, okay, in the beginning there is a shock, but after some time you will get to the not to the place, to the situation that you are just there and live the moment. You don't care anymore, and those moments produces diamonds. This is a quite primitive method, but it works. But basically, my shooting approach is quite simple. I started shooting there with a simple decision. I will not say cut until the shot comes out perfect. I won't compromise on less than perfect. I mean, the only scenario, Eitan, my producer, said yes in his head. The only scenario in which I will finish filming the shot before I feel full satisfaction is if an ambulance will come and 2 big guys with white coats will drag me off my monitor. So once you start your shooting day with such a decision and take it seriously, you higher your chances to achieve your goals.
The first part and the third part was shot in a studio in Berlin. You have your German producers, the Match Factory, and the part of the military checkpost was shot in Israel. How did you, I know you worked in art direction before, so you're very concrete about how everything is supposed to look. I remember Viola sending me the first shots from the set in Israel. What was important for you there when you were looking for your location and for your artistic setup of the apartment of Michael and the container that is sinking in Israel in the desert?
That the flat will reflect his character. That was my main consideration.
And how did you find Jonathan, the soldier, the actor? How did you find him?
At the location?
No, the actor.
The actor. I just saw many unprofessional young soldier, because usually in Israel you finish the military and then you go for 2 years to wash your head in South America or India, and then you start to learn cinema. So if you want to find young actors, they will be around 30, 28, and I wanted really a child. So I saw many of them and they told the monologue, the long monologue. And when I saw him, I understood that in this case, I just need not to spoil it, because it was very natural and without. I like that mainly the fact that I couldn't felt the effort in his acting. You do it, you know, just like that. So I immediately choose him.
Right. Did you ever say in the cast, Katriel, what do you remember were the crucial moments when you planned the production?
No, I knew about the whole shooting down at the Dead Sea. I knew about Jonathan. By the way, Jonathan, the boy, is now actually in the military, serving in a very top combat unit. So he's now doing his military service. Before he did military service for Shmulik in his film. And then, of course, I saw quite a number of rough cuts, because we talk a lot, and I see a lot, and we discuss and consult a lot. And we had some very good discussions, and I came with some ideas and so on. But, you know, I always remember that we are a film fund, and we can, of course, talk, be involved, but never interfere. So we had a lot of talks. I tried to convince Shmulik here and there in some places. I tried to make him aware of some places that could create some questions and so on. But again, only to the level of discussions of a dialogue. And that's it, because we have to remember that we are a film fund, and as a film fund, we have to always remember the border between being involved and interfere. And for me, as I say, the creative freedom of the artist is number one. And of course, I will have my super red lines in the super extreme cases. But this was not the case with this film, and I went along with it, and we watched it time and again. And as I said, we have a very strong dialogue. We had also in Lebanon a very long dialogue, really almost scene by scene. And with this film, the same. And because I think that we have this very strong trust, and also a very strong friendship, and also we share, it just so happened, a similar past in a way of being in combat unit, seeing real tough battles and tremendous losses and all of that. And this is also maybe in a way part of the bonding between us and Eitan, the producer, that we all share a tough past, especially in our military service. And so we know what we are talking about, we know where we come from, and we don't forget those very difficult, trying moments that we had to go through.
And what were these that you mentioned? What were these scenes where you thought, oh, I'm going to give Shmulik my advice or my opinion about it, which could become critical?
Well, actually, I started with the third part, and I thought that the third part with Daphna, there were things that give her a little more space and things like that, which was in the different cuts. Her space was growing up and so on. I had some questions about the ending. And of course, I have some questions about the military part and about, of course, the metaphor and about the most famous scene that everybody knows, who became like this scene, which I guess maybe we'll see it in a minute, I don't know, which is, of course, the burial of the car and then the cover-up of the officers and so on, which, you know, we discussed it at length, but all my life, I respect the creative freedom of the filmmaker. And who say that I know better than him? And who say that my vision is more accurate or better or more right than the filmmaker himself? But definitely, I talk all the time, and I give my advice.
Do you remember when you talked to Katriel and you thought, okay, he's really right here, I'm going to change this, or at a different scene where you thought, no, I'm going to continue with my vision here and stick to it?
Yeah, I mean, yes. Usually I try to listen to to everyone, because from time to time, you can find the good advice. And yeah, I changed something in the editing in the last sequence. And when Katri warned me about the scene, he didn't told me that I need to take it out. He just warned me that I'm going to be I'm going to climb to the top of the blacklist, and this is this is a risk that I need to take. Because I'm a bit autistic here and there, I just consider my artistic and dramatic considerations, and for me, everything else is not relevant.
Shall we have a look at the scene?
Yes, I can say something before, or we still have time?
Please do, we have a lot of time.
I don't want to talk about the scandal.
We'll talk later.
No, but I want to. But I want to say to talk about the way I see it, to diagnose it. It's important to me because I never spoke till now. I'm not intending to give answers to our culture minister, but to try to analyze it. As I said before, I wanted to tell a personal story that reflects the collective. And I started for myself. The common image of the post-traumatic man is basically a cliché. You expect him to have nightmares, he's probably lonely and not communicate. Those are the clinic's cases. Michael's case, like many of his generation, is a case of repression and denial. Michael would do anything to prove that he is all right, and he would benefit from it. He will build a successful business, he will raise a family, and surround himself by expensive apartment and luxury, in a desperate attempt to hide his secret, his weakness. From outside, everything seemed to be normal, fine, but deep inside, his soul is bleeding, and when he has nowhere to download his pain, he kicks the dog, because the dog will keep his secret and will continue to love him without conditions. And in the Israeli society, there are many versions like Michael, mainly because of his generation, my generation, the second generation of the Holocaust survivors. Our main problem was that we couldn't complain about anything. Our parents, our teachers, who were obviously survived the most horrible trauma in the modern time and were naturally not very stable. They used to wave with a number on their arms and to shout all day long that they survived the Holocaust. And who are we, spoiled children that born in a sunny country with a blue sea and piles of oranges? Who are we to complain about? So when I came back from war with, 2 hands, 2 legs, 10 fingers, without any burning marks on my skin, so to complain that you hurt inside you was unacceptable. Overcome, be a man. We survived the Holocaust, and they washed our heads. When I went to first grade, my teacher wrote on the blackboard, "It's good to die for your country." An iconic sentence that one of our war heroes said before he dies. This is the legend anyway. And I remember a story that they told us about one of the school graduated, a soldier named Ilan who threw himself on a grenade. Every Memorial Day ceremony, they told us this story, how he sacrificed himself to save 6 other soldiers. And we were kids, so I remember that here and there, before I fell asleep, I imagined that it was me. I fantasized how I threw myself on this grenade and died heroically. And every Memorial Day ceremony, my story is told, and the girls shed a tear. So the traumatic society in which we lived in fucked us up completely. So perhaps the conclusion of the film is that fate cannot be changed, not because it's divine, but because of the nature of the traumatic Israeli man who shaped the nature of the collective stuck in its trauma. The little step that can save us from the loop of the Foxtrot must be done by the leadership. Not, by the way, necessarily this leadership, any leadership, but usually they do the opposite. They press on the buttons of the trauma with slogans that have nothing to do with reality anymore, except, as I said before, our emotional memory, whose instinctual power is stronger than any current reality or logic. For example, we are in an existential danger is the mother of slogans. When a few days ago, I hear some politicians said, we are a technological superpower, we have the strongest army and nuclear weapon, according to foreign sources, of course, because we are in an existential danger. And it sounded to me like he said, I'm young, I'm strong, and I'm healthy because I'm sick. So I was surprised to see how before the film was released, our culture minister attacked it without seeing it. And she did it in exactly the same way the film talks about. I mean, her attack actually confirmed the film statement because she pressed on the buttons of trauma with slogans that brings pathos to its peak, like, you know, Foxtrot is destroying the country, as if the film was a nuclear weapon that will erase us from the map. And her attack, once again, posed a mirror to the radical split in our society. So her voters, her fans, defend the film without seeing it, and her opponents fill the cinema theater and support the film. And the struggle is no longer only for the film itself. It's for freedom of speech and expression, and the beauty of and the purity of art. And Katriel, my friend, is regarding to cinema the main bodyguard that stands between. That's why we can screen the clip now if we have time, or we don't. And then I want to talk a bit about.
So, do you want to?
No, I've been now the head of the fund more than 19 years, and I've gone to a whole number of ministers of culture and all kinds of regimes and this and that. And basically, it's been like this in different levels throughout the years. And I've faced a lot of pressure and sometimes very nasty phone calls and so on. But on the other hand, I can say, because of the structure of the fund or the funding system in Israel, that we are not a government agency, that we are completely independent, registered and licensed NGOs, we managed to a certain extent to do what we do and maintain our complete and total creative freedom. Yet I cannot deny, and I can say that even from a film which I was one of the producers back in 1984, this is not a new story, those ups and downs and so on. On the other hand, we have to understand this is films, this is cinema, and creative people and artists are always questioning, and they will always question. And this is part of the nature of being an artist. And for me, with this particular situation that we face now, I didn't see a base for a dialogue, and I'm completely always open for the dialogue, and no one has to agree, and we can argue and discuss. But first of all, watch the film, and then let's talk. Maybe I'm totally wrong, maybe Shmulik is totally wrong, maybe we created a terrible something, but first of all, the minimum, take 2 hours and watch the film, and then let's talk.
Maybe as an explanation, the Israeli cultural minister Miri Regev said that I haven't seen the film, but it feeds into the anti-Israeli narrative, and so she So that was the scandal that we've been mentioning. She was then excluded from the Israeli Academy Awards. Then the story continued with the festival in Paris that wanted to screen Foxtrot and wasn't allowed to, or was told not to. They did it anyway.
No, did you say that she was excluded from the Israeli Academy Awards?
Yeah,
The
wasn't
minister?
that the case? Yeah.
No, she was invited, like she was invited a year ago. A year ago, she was invited to give the first prize and the leading prize in the Israeli Film Academy Awards, which is a big ceremony, live on air, once a year, like a mini Hollywood. And she used this platform to make a very strong political speech. And then the board of management of the Israeli Film Academy invited her again this year to come and give the first prize and so on, with all the honor. But they asked her to just greet the winner and so on, and not use the platform for, again, a strong political speech, because this is the one night that the Israeli cinema celebrates itself. And she replied to them, not to me, I have nothing to do with it, that no one will tell me what to do. So the next thing that the board of management of the Israeli Film Academy Awards did, they sent her a letter saying, Miss Minister, Madam Minister, you are not invited, which is a tough measure, which I'm not sure it was right, personally, but it's a tough measure. If that's the case, then you are not invited. And of course, it was a very offensive step, which I have my big doubts about it. And of course, she didn't come. And this even enhanced the whole conflict, in which Foxtrot is only a single, it's a symbol, because there's a hell of a lot more. We have to understand that now we are talking about the entire art and culture establishment in Israel. And you know, we got together more than 130 art and culture institutions. And we got together in order basically to keep our freedom. And it's really about all the museums and dance companies and stage theaters and the Israeli Philharmonic and opera and the cinema. We are now all together. And for me, it's a sad reality. I wish we could have a much better and a fruitful dialogue with the ministry. But it's not only the cinema, it's the entire art and culture establishment, and it's a very sad reality.
Should we please screen this clip, number 3?
Okay, this was Death Theme. And I wonder if this crime was committed by the Israeli police, let's say. The next day, people will talk about the film itself, about the plot and the cinema. No one will stand up and shout that the film is defaming the Israeli police. People would understand that this is not a documentary film and is not obligated to reflect some objective truth. His truth is artistic and dramatic. But the fact that I touched the army which symbolized our liberation from our trauma made me a kind of traitor for a quite large part of the Israeli society. The fact that I fought in bloody battles and paid a heavy price on my part in the First Lebanon War, the fact that my friend here, Katriel, survived the most brutal and controversial battle in the history of the Israeli wars and saved many wounded soldiers, those facts have no public value anymore. We are traitors because our culture minister announced, without seeing the film, that the film defames the IDF and incited a large public who has not seen the film and consider us as traitors. I just want to add I want just to say that, you know, the IDF is not an army of mercenaries. This is the people army. Our army reflects us. The film shows a true average Israeli soldier, a child like any other child in his age. He has dilemmas and doubts. He is neither good or bad. He is a product of our society. The film does not defame or glorify, but gives a real image. True is not built from absolute good or bad. True is complex and influenced by our state of mind. And yes, I choose to write and direct the second sequence and to add let's say, to add a kind of surrealism to this sequence, because I like to write and direct it as an allegory in a way that there is not exactly such a roadblock or such a specific reality. I mean, the film, the sequence floats a few inches above the ground. I think that it's quite understandable that this is, one big allegory. And personally, I don't have an interest on a realistic film about a roadblock. The roadblock is a mirror that reflects our society, apathic and anxious society. And the scene that we saw, for me, is a climax for an unhealthy situation, a situation that's getting more and more crooked, like the container. The Mercedes burial expresses repression and denial. We prefer to bury the true in the mud that we created rather than confront it and ask ourselves penetrating questions. Someone, I don't remember who, said that our mistakes are the failures of our children. And I really, really believe that, every human society should strive to be better, to improve itself. And the basic and necessary condition for improvement is the ability to accept self-criticism. But when self-criticism is marketed to the people as a betrayal and critics consider to be traitors, you have no chance of rising, just bend, sink, and roll down till the mud where you bury your true will swallow you up. So if I criticize the place I live, I do it because I worry, I do it because I want to protect it, and I do it from love.
As opposed to the cultural minister, most people in our audience will probably have seen the film, if not before, then last night. So I would like to ask if there are any questions from the audience to Samuel or Katriel. Yes, up there. Do we have a microphone? Or I can, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I saw the film yesterday, and congratulations on such an achievement. I think you have a true talent. I don't think it's very obvious. And I have a question regarding the last clip, the last scene that we saw. You just explained it, but I would like if you tell us more about this situation. Like, is it something that could have happened, would happen, or I know that the whole thing is a metaphor, because the checkpoint is not a real checkpoint. The whole thing is made up, but because throughout this conversation, the other part of the story, like the other side, was not mentioned even once, and it makes me really very sad. And I'm from Palestine, and I've been dealing with teenage soldiers like for a very long time, and it's a very different experience. So my question is, you have taken this decision to make this scene and to go on top of the blacklist in the Israeli filmmaking community. What was your reason? Why did you want to do this scene? What was the real reason for you to show this?
I think that I already answered it. If you can be more specific, you feel like a disappointment why I just did it and didn't deal with the Palestinian problem?
No, not at all, no. My question is, if this thing happens in real life, if it does, I don't know. If you know, I don't know.
I personally didn't heard about something like this. I believe that like the generals say, in war, like it's war, from time to time, shit happens.
But this is not war, this is a checkpoint.
Exactly, and this is the idea here. This is part of the trauma of the Israeli society, to make us feel that we are in a constant war, yeah. Of course, I mean, you ask yourself for why we need it, what they are doing there. And the commander reminded them that this is a war. This is part of the brainwash. This is part of the trauma. Because I choose to do a film about the trauma of the Israeli society. And part of it is to, and when I talked about pushing the trauma buttons, is to tell us that we are in war. We are in war. To give us the sense that we are in danger, and we are not in danger anymore. And I think that this roadblock is unnecessary.
Right.
I hope that I tried to answer your questions. I hope that
thank you for the answer. It's just because in the way you answered it, or the way you explained it before the clip or after the clip, it was that it's a thing that would not happen. Of course, they would not kill anyone and then bury him and just ignore it, but it's a thing that is still happening until now. This is what I want to say.
That's what Samuel already said, that this is a film, this is a work of art, and it's his freedom of art, basically. Do we have other questions? Yeah, right there.
Hello. I watched the film yesterday evening, and congratulations on an awesome piece of work. I just wanted to ask this a little silly question. The film opens with this shot of on top of a bus, I think it's a bus, on this long road in the desert. And towards the end of the film, we kind of close it with that same shot, and at that stage, Arvo Part's Spiegel von Spiegel is playing. Is there a small homage there to Gus Van Sant's Jerry, by any chance?
No, sorry to disappoint you.
It was a funny coincidence because we had.
But this is, there are many.
Of course.
True is that in Lebanon, I started with an empty sunflower fields, and I ended with the sunflower fields with a tank. So I guess I'm repeating myself. I need to move on.
It was an interesting coincidence because we had the Gus Van Sant's panel thing right before in the same room, and he decided to start the event with like that 5-minute clip where they're driving in the car in the desert somewhere in America, and he's playing that same song, and seeing that in the same room, I was like, oh, this a little wink to Gus Van Sant. Just wanted to ask that.
Hi there. This is a question to Katriel. Has the kind of the issues you've been having with the culture minister and the government, is that practically impacting the type of films that are being made now in Israel, or impacting the funding and the practical side of film production? Has it had a knock-on effect?
Not at all. Actually, there's a lot of noise and a lot of talk, but I can say that up to this very moment, which is, I think today is February 20th, since this government came to place, In practical terms, nothing really happened. We keep on doing what we've been doing all these years, and we keep on functioning, acting, operating the way we've done all these years. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of a situation that maybe does have an influence, not on the fund and not on the funding. This is secured. But what it has, it creates a kind of a zeitgeist, a kind of a trend within the country, which could lead to something which, for me, it's a real danger, and this is self-censorship. When the filmmakers, the creative people, the artists, start asking themselves questions and impose on themselves, sometimes unconsciously, a sort of a self-censorship. This is, at the moment, for me, the main concern.
Okay, thanks.
There was one more question over there. Can you raise your hand again, the woman with the glasses? You wanted to ask something before? Which one? Okay, so we're not doing
Okay. Hello. Well, unfortunately, I wasn't able to see the film last night, but just to clarify, I take it that those kids in the car scene were Palestinian kids? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, okay. My other question, which was partially answered, but again, what do you think the cost that you will pay as a filmmaker for telling your narrative, not necessarily in terms of funding and stuff, but as an individual living in the Israeli society? And I mean, it just surprises me a bit that Israel is always praising itself as you know, the democracy, the only democracy of the Middle East. But again, it's people who have distinctive voices like yourself have to go through this, both from the government bodies like the Ministry of Culture and by the people, the citizens themselves.
So I can say that it is a democracy. And if I look at all our neighboring countries and many other countries, they don't deal with the wounds. It took America quite a number of years to deal with the Vietnam wounds. France, until today, hardly touched the fiasco in Algeria and all the years that they were stuck in Algeria. We deal with our wounds, and we deal in a brave and a very straightforward way. And we do it, and we can do it, and we will keep doing it, because we really do it. And you can see many countries, in many places, they don't even begin to dare to do it. And I think that our filmmakers are courageous. Yes, we have a government, they don't always like it, but we are here not to serve the government. We are here to tell our stories in a straightforward way, in a complete freedom, and we do it, and we can still do it, and it's happening. And I think that we can praise the democratic situation in Israel for the moment. I don't know what will happen next week, but for the moment, all throughout the years, I went personally to endless up and downs. I made a film, I was involved in a film in 1983, in which we had to change the telephone number in our office few times. So it's not new, but still, we say what we say in a complete creative freedom, and this has not changed. This is clear.
There's one more question, and then we need to move on.
Firstly, I just want to say congratulations on the film. I saw it last night, and I was incredibly, deeply moved. I've not been able to stop thinking about it since. I'm here on the Talent Campus. I'm from South Africa, and I was wondering if you are familiar with The Wound. It was our entry into the foreign language Oscar competition and was shortlisted along with your film. And it has just been banned by our government. The Film and Publication Board of South Africa has overturned its previous rating of the film because they've deemed it to be culturally offensive to a specific tribal group, but they've banned it on the basis of sexual content, which is homosexual. So it's very clear that it's been banned because of homophobia. And I know the filmmakers, they've all got death threats against them. They're afraid to go back to the country. I was wondering if you could tell us, if you could say something about what to do in a situation like that when, you know, as a filmmaker, you've done a courageous thing, and now your life is being threatened.
No, life is not being threatened. It sounds very extreme. Life not is being threatened. He flies back and forth to Israel. Nobody stops him. It's only a movie. And I can tell you that this, not a single film in the history of Israeli cinema, and I'm there almost 50 years, was banned. We don't know this thing. Nothing was ever banned. Really, we go all the way, and some of the people here, some of the programmers sometimes are amazed that this kind of creative freedom we have. And I think that this is part of our strength. And I believe that this film, like many of our films and many of documentaries, are really serving the cause that we are a real democracy. And this is really to the praise of Israel as such. And I think that nothing was ever banned in Israel. There was not a single film that I can remember that was banned by anybody. And I think that I cannot talk for South Africa, I don't know enough about it, but I think that the filmmakers should stay the course and stand by the film and stand by what they believe. And sometimes you have to pay a price. But in our case, I don't think that it sounds more dramatic than it really is. Life goes on. If Shmulik will submit again a project, it will be great. And if some of the other filmmakers will submit a project, it will be super great. We have no problems whatsoever. But yes, we stand on our course and we stand on our beliefs. And I think that part of the strength, and I believe that the Israeli cinema, you can say now that after many years, there is a kind of a distinct cinematic language when we talk about Israeli cinema. And you can see that this is a daring, sometimes blunt, sometimes courageous cinema. And I think that this is part of our strength and power. And I think that there are not that many countries that have this kind of freedom.
But I think that the real danger from cases like this is that young creators will start to censor themselves. And I think that, how can I say it, I think that you need to go all the way with your worldview, with what you want to say, with how you want to say it, with your vision. Don't create with hesitation or out of fear. Take risks, challenge yourself, because in the end of the day you have nothing to lose. And most important, I think, don't underestimate the audience. He is much more sophisticated than you think he is.
Always remember that politicians come and go, but the films, if they're good, they will stay forever. And that's it.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Samuel. Thank you.